So I was brewing the Archimandrite for the Glory tier, also known as cEDH, and as I was brewing it, it just didn't seem like it had much flavor to it. It was just a lot of staples. There were some good advisors that I was throwing in, but overall it just felt very samey in terms of what these colors could do in the context of cEDH. And so I said to myself, how can I make this a little more interesting or challenge myself in terms of deck building? And so I said, well, what if I used a minimum of 20 Persistent Petitioners? So that's what I did. And I know you're probably saying, you know, at cEDH you got to use the best cards given in the colors and strategy that you're doing. And I know, I get it. But sometimes it can be fun to kind of stretch the limits and see what you come up with. Innovation is really great for EDH and, in my opinion, cEDH as a whole. So we went ahead and tried it, and this is what I came up with. If you want to know what kind of upgrades you would make if you were to not run as many Persistent Petitioners, in the sideboard, got some pretty decent options we can use in terms of upgrades. Let's go ahead and get started with it. We've got the Dockside Extortionist, Draenith Magistrate, Esper Sentinel. I know I was saying, like, you know, I don't want to be running all the staples, but some are just extremely powerful, and we are giving up a lot of power by using all of these Persistent Petitioners. So we got to make up with that power somehow. In addition to that, we're also just going to make our strategy extremely focused with what it wants to do. Try to trim as much fat as possible. We've also got the Goblin Welder, which we can use to get back some of our important artifacts, Grand Abolisher, stop players from interacting with us. Monastery Mentor is going to be one of our win cons, potentially, and a Spell Seeker to help us find some important instant spells for our combos. And a Sorceries, really straightforward. We've got a Gamble and a Savine's Reclamation, a little bit of tutoring, a little bit of recursion. Since we're going to be taking a little bit of extra time to set up, we need a really strong interaction package that we can use to stop other decks from winning. Some really notable includes are going to be the Final Fortune, which we can use to essentially, you know, we take that extra turn once we've established our infinite combo. Dramatic Reversal, which we're going to pair with our Isochron Scepter, since we can essentially draw our entire deck and produce infinite mana potentially when we do this. Once we imprint a Dramatic Reversal onto our Isochron Scepter, we can tap our advisors to draw a card with the Archimandrite, and then we can just untap them and then keep drawing. And from there, we can win in a few different ways. We can either get a Final Fortune, and with all these Persistent Petitioners, we can just take that extra turn and then swing out, possibly with a Monastery Mentor as well, since we can just make infinite dudes, infinite monks, and then make them infinitely large, since we can just cast, the Isochron Scepter casts a copy of the spell that's imprinted with it. Or you can use Jeskai Ascendancy to make your dudes infinitely big. And there's something important here where it says whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you may draw a card if you do discard a card. So once I've established that you can make the infinite mana and get your infinite cast off of the Isochron Scepter, you can just use the Jeskai Ascendancy as a buff instead of as a way to, like, sift through cards. Speaking of the Jeskai Ascendancy, our other combo is going to utilize this card with the Retraction Helix. So once you have a card that is mana positive, a mana rock that's positive, you can return that mana rock to your hand, and then from there you can recast it, trigger your Jeskai Ascendancy, untap the creature that you used to return the rock to your hand, then you can tap that guy again, and you can keep doing it over and over and over again, and you can eventually just draw until you find, you know, cards that can start producing colored mana for you, or you can start getting, you know, extra Persistent Petitioners out, where you can start drawing extra cards with the Archimandrite. And then from there, do basically the same thing that you were going to do with the Isochron Scepter, where you can either swing with infinitely large dudes, or you can take an extra turn. Another way we can win with this Isochron Scepter is with a copy artifact. Once we have established our Isochron Scepter combo, we can cast a copy artifact, have it enter as a copy of Isochron Scepter, and then with our imprint trigger, we can just copy a Lightning Bolt, and from there, we can deal infinite damage because we'll cast our Lightning Bolt off the first Isochron Scepter, use the other Isochron Scepter to untap both Isochron Scepters, and, you know, since we are moving up from that battle version, we've got a lot of really efficient mana ramp that we're going to be using, so we can power out that Archimandrite, start drawing cards as fast as possible. We do need to be drawing cards, a lot of cards in this deck, since we do have a lot of fluff with the Persistent Petitioners. Another way we can win potentially, if you like don't have the Archimandrite, but you do have like some Persistent Petitioners with all these untap effects, is you can mill everybody out, and then you can use the Soul Guide Lantern to just exile everyone's libraries. Milling everybody out and just passing the turn can be a little risky. Someone could do like a Noxious Revival, bring back a Thassa's Oracle, or they could like Necromancy a Thassa's Oracle and potentially just win the game that way. So then yeah, we've got like the Mystic Remora, Mystic Study for a little bit of extra card draw. And then with our lands, really efficient with our lands. All of our lands are entering untapped, producing multiple colors of mana if they can. I do have this island. I'm a big fan of running at least one basic in your deck. You don't really have to, but it's just something that I like to do. In terms of like ways that we could like upgrade, if you don't want to be doing like the super Mimi with all the Persistent Petitioners, you could add in stuff like Archfist of Agma. Unsettled Mariner could be a decent option. Ledger Shredder, just more of these staple type cards. Ranger Captain of Egos to help you combo off without having people interact with you. Grand Arbor could be another really great option. And of course, since we're in Jeskai, you could do like Intuition Piles with Brain Freeze, and since we have the Savine's Reclamation in the Sorceries, Lion's Eye Diamond with the Underworld Breach, you could do that. Displacer Kitten combos with the Teferi Time Reveler and or the Village Bellringer, since we can like cast something, flicker our Village Bellringer, untap our Persistent Petitioners or Advisors, tap them, draw a bunch more cards, cast another non-creature spell, flicker it, keep going over and over and over again. And then the Thrumming Stone, so this was part of like what I was trying to do in terms of the challenge, where I really wanted to utilize Thrumming Stone in some kind of way with this deck. But the more I got into it and the more I was bringing the deck, it was really hard for me to figure out a way to like get this Thrumming Stone on the battlefield, one, and then after that cast and get a bunch of these Persistent Petitioners on the field. But once you do that, it's like, what do you do after that? How are we winning after that? And in these colors specifically, outside of like some interesting, like maybe some like haste shenanigans, it became too much. Like you needed too many working pieces in the context of cEDH to really make this card work. And another really big issue is that this says spells you control over level 4. So the first spell you cast is not going to resolve until you stop rippling, because whenever you cast a spell, you reveal the top 4 cards of your library. This is a trigger that happens when you cast the spell, and then you can cast the next spell. So essentially, you'd cast your first Persistent Petitioner, it would find a second Persistent Petitioner, and then all of those would be on the stack at the same time, and then they would all resolve individually. But the big issue here is that, let's say you do get your Thrumming Stone out, and then you cast Persistent Petitioner, and you've got like, 10 or 12 Persistent Petitioners that you've hit, someone can just Mind Break Trap you and exile all of the Persistent Petitioners, and then it just does nothing. So the more I thought about it and the more I really tried to make this card work in this deck, it just isn't very great. Thanks for checking out this episode of Opal Wave MTG, and until next time.